Thanks, James. Nice to be here.
Of course. Well, we can start off. We have a couple, very interesting topics to dive into, but would love to hear, a little bit more about you and how everything's been going at Perkins Eastman.
Great. Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. This has definitely been an interesting year, I think, for everybody. Came with a lot of challenges, but we've kind of looked at this as new opportunities also. So, we are excited to finally get back into some of our offices and have things open up a little bit more as we have light at the end of the tunnel here. So I'm actually in our Austin office today. And in one of the states, it's a little bit more open. But a little bit about Perkins Eastman. We're a global architecture firm headquartered in New York with 21 offices around the world. I'm the co-CEO and executive director. And our markets really focus on everything from large-scale mixed use and urban planning to healthcare and education to commercial and mixed use. And we've have the opportunity to really work all over the U.S. as well as globally.
Great. Well, you guys certainly are keeping busy, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's dive into technology. Big picture, Shawn. What evolutions have you seen in technology and architecture and construction?
Well, there's a lot of evolutions, and I think some of them that we've seen before the pandemic have actually been accelerated a little bit before the pandemic, and I think that's been good. And I always try to separate technology within the industry on sort of two parts. There's the production part, which is how we use BIM and how that's becoming much more integrated into the design process, the production process, and the construction process. And that sort of really becomes sort of a whole seamless thing where it's bringing together the design, the consultants, the owner, the users, the contractors together. And so that part, I think, is we're seeing pushed a lot more, especially since teams have gone remotely and everybody being able to work on the cloud. And that's a big part of the technology shift that we've seen, and that was happening much more before the pandemic also. But now with teams more remote, I think it's being used and accelerated a little bit more. The other part that I'd like to talk about a lot is how technology informs the design and the programming process. I always say as architects, we need to learn how to get in earlier and stay later with our clients. As the part in the middle, the production part, becomes much more automated and more streamlined. It's how we use data and technology on the creative and the thinking and the programming part and the analytical part at the beginning of the projects. And so we've been investing a lot in technologies in what we call data analytics and predictive analytics, and which helps inform before the design process begins. And that's been quite interesting on everything from sort of large scale on our citywide scale projects where we're looking at how, whether it's pedestrian and traffic flows and things like that, and how they're working and how we're mapping that and making informed decisions, to working with healthcare providers to understand the predictive analytics on the communities that they're serving and how they'll grow over time. To down to the buildings, to sort of understanding how buildings will be used and how they'll be changed. So using the technology sort of in the very early stages before there's ever a project on understanding patterns, behavior, emotion, and things like that has been really interesting for us. And as much as we're investing in the production side of technology, we're also investing it on the analytical side on the early stages of projects.
Super important for any stakeholders and the end users as well. Tons of great potential there for sure. Headaches saved all around. And something you touched on as well is BIM and modeling. I think you guys are doing some really interesting applications with modeling. I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, well, the BIM model really is kind of the hub of everything now. When you move into it, it starts very early on in the process, and it becomes the design tool, but it also becomes a production tool that everybody works on. It's allowed us to integrate teams from all over the world just within our own projects, but it's allowed us to bring in all the other teams and the consultants too. So having everybody work on that one model allows much more fluidity to the process, and helps you eliminate clashes as you sort of move on. And so I think where the industry still has a lot of evolution to happen is how you move from that into construction. And so we are seeing a lot more on how the BIM model is used to then go and inform the construction and then ultimately the operation of the project. And so it really depends on the project. It really depends on the owner, sometimes the country where we're working in on how that BIM model sort of evolves through the process. And but I think that's just going to continue. What we create, the real asset of the project is the BIM model, because that will have ultimately will carry through the life of the building.
Yeah, for sure. In relation to that, visualization and virtual reality, there's a ton going on in that space. Are you guys utilizing any of that?
Tons of it, and that's always fun as architects, right? Because we're in a visual industry, and finding new and creative ways to be able to design and present our designs to clients. And much more before the pandemic, we really started to get into virtual reality and augmented reality, and this was pretty cool. We've now really sped that up a lot, because with everybody working remotely, the one thing that we've all missed over the past year is being able to sit in a room and hang drawings up around, have models in the room, have clients come in, and everybody sort of be around it. So the impact of design when you're just presenting it on your screen or on a laptop when people are sitting at home, sometimes it's very hard to really present the spatial aspect of a design to a client. So we used virtual reality quite a lot over the last year, where we've loaded the designs on there, shipped the headsets to clients, and then had meetings that way. So part of the presentation is a bit 2D like this, where people are on laptops or on a Zoom call. But a lot of the meetings are when people have the headsets on and they can kind of connect with each other and sort of experience the virtual room or virtual space or walk around the building together. And that's been really helpful. And it's not perfect yet, but it's added another dimension to the design process, and it's added another tool, I think, to the toolkit in being able to present designs. So we think that's going to continue. It's going to get better and better the way that our design teams are using the tools and the new tools and plugins that are out there for it. So that's something we're really excited about. And I think if it was a pretty bad year, but there's a few good things that we think came out of how we all work, and that's one of the things that we feel will stick with us.
So you think this will stay post-pandemic, potentially even become a standard?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's sort of the new toy right now, but definitely it adds another dimension, just like models and just like drawings and just like fly-throughs and all those things that we do. Now the virtual reality is really part of the design process on a lot of things, not everything, but many of them.
That's great. Something I'd love to dive into, of course, important to everyone from architects to anyone using the building, anyone walking around the street. Commercial real estate, of course, is a big piece in making a more sustainable environment. What are architects and designers and GCs doing to kind of play this role, and what role does technology play?
Sustainability has sort of been an interesting discussion over the last few years, and I think again the pandemic has accelerated that conversation and pivoted it in a different way. To me, and to a lot of us, sustainability is a baseline. Buildings, environments, we all know that the climate is changing, the environment's changing, and we all, as designers, have to play our part into solving that and into making the world a better place. So, but the conversation that has really changed is how does that all have an impact on us as human beings and as users of the buildings and the places that we live, work, and play. So the idea of wellness has been very important, and this was happening well before the pandemic hit. That the conversation was starting to shift from how sustainable this building is to how does this building affect me? How does it make me better as an employee being there? Why is this building better for me to work in? What are the things about it? Why is this hotel better to stay than this hotel? Is it going to give me a better night's sleep? What are the things in there that are going to make me a healthier individual? So people have choices, and we've seen people make choices now based on how well the buildings are, and rather than how sustainable the buildings are. So they're kind of trying to balance those sort of social choices versus the individual choices for themselves. And the pandemic, I think, really has just accelerated this exponentially. That everybody's super hyper focused right now on well places and how healthy is this environment. When I go to this restaurant, what is the atmosphere like? What's the food they're serving? When I stay in a hotel, why is this hotel better and healthier for me? And sustainability is kind of the baseline, right? So it has to be a sustainable building. It can't be sort of the gas guzzlers of the past. It has to be a little bit different. But the real focus we feel going forward is that wellness is the sort of the new barometer on how buildings and places will be judged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Diving more into wellness, of course, especially these days, hopefully not as much moving forward, but use of space is definitely playing into wellness. Are you looking at data to rethink the way you're designing buildings?
Definitely, and that's kind of goes back to what I said earlier, that we're really investing in the data analytics part at the beginning of projects. So understanding people's movements, behavior, emotion, things like that, and how that maps into it. So if we're looking at sort of an urban space, it's one thing, and how you can sort of look at the data analytics and traffic patterns and things like that to understand where things are going, versus if it's a healthcare system or if it's a workplace or an office. So it's kind of cool. Some of the stuff that we're doing, we're really overlaying the sort of the behavioral patterns or the patterns of movement with environmental conditions, as well as other things, and sort of looking at data. Data is only good if you can actually decipher what it means. And so how we're sort of looking at that and saying, are there certain trends that we're seeing? And one of the interesting things that we've done is we won the Latrobe Prize, the AIA Latrobe Prize a couple of years ago, and this was a real focus on healthy education systems, and now it's become a partnership with the DC School District and Drexel University to do this research study, which says creating healthier school environments, creating healthier environments impacts the students, impacts the community, creates better education rates, and all these things like that. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but it's not just the design. It's about how the design is laid out, how natural light and the environment sort of play into this. And so there's a lot of data analytics that sort of goes into the foundation of the research that we're doing for that. So we think it's pretty cool. The more data, the more things that we can sort of learn from may make us better designers or more informed designers going forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to dive into a little bit more about the impact of technology's role in our day-to-day jobs and lives. As we innovate, there's always, some hesitancy and this technology might replace this job function of mine, but also it has potential to make your job easier. What's your view on the role of technology's impact on someone's day-to-day and role?
Well, technology always evolves, and so people within the industry always need to evolve with the technology, right? So we don't use drafting boards and T-squares and things like that anymore. So we've gone from that to AutoCAD, and now from AutoCAD to BIM. And so the technology evolves, and so I think people within the industry always evolve with the technology is one thing. But also how the technology is used. I think that as we get more into BIM modeling, and it becomes much more sophisticated. You used to have to, whenever you drew everything by hand, you had a whole draft room of people, cranking drawings out to get a set of drawings done. I think as we become much more automated, we'll continue to have more high-skilled people that's doing the production and doing the modeling, and really understanding the integration of the process from the beginning to the end. So more high-skilled and much more integrated to how the BIM models are used. So I think that's a big shift in the industry, where it does become much more sort of integrated. And I think it's exciting too, but there's a lot of other pieces that go into it. Now there's buildings are smart, right? So there's all kinds of data analytics that go into the building and how that overlays. So while it may become a little bit more not automated, but a little bit more hopefully efficient in the production part, there's a lot of other pieces now that make it more complex than it used to be.
Yeah, definitely. So as you know, technology is innovating. There are people who are creating these technologies, pushing them forward, coming to folks like yourselves saying we have this great new product. Would love for you to try it out and check it out. How does someone like yourself think about implementing either deciding that you want to use this technology and then implementing it into your company?
Well, a lot of times it comes from some of the people that are working in this and say, hey, this is kind of an interesting thing. I'm going to test it out for a little bit. And it's a new plugin, for Revit, or it's a new sort of software that kind of plugs into our energy modeling, our new visualization tool. So our design teams, usually kind of do this on their own. We give them a lot of freedom. We don't try to let people, at least our leadership, work in a box. So they're always kind of looking at new things, and can it enhance what we do? Can it enhance our capability? Can it enhance our visualization? Are there new things that are make us faster with the visualization, or are converting it into virtual reality and things like that? So we're always testing new things out. Sometimes there's larger, more focused things when products are coming to market. So we've partnered sometimes with different groups or our institutions to kind of test pilot something. But that's usually when people come to us and say, hey, we want you to be part of this focus group. We'd like a small team to dedicate some time to help, see if this could be integrated and useful for what you do. So it kind of goes both ways, like sort of the grassroots stuff that happens a lot, especially with our younger people that are always trying to do new things. And then sort of the more formalized partnerships, sometimes when either service providers or our institutions come to us to test pilot something larger. So
yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious because some firms are of course very excited about technology and really integrating new things, and some are a bit tech averse, and sometimes understandably so. When folks are a little bit more tech averse, what advice do you give them?
Well, technology can't solve all your problems, and we struggle also with a balance that I believe that as much as technology is just another tool. It's just like AutoCAD was a tool, right? People said once we start drawing by hand and move to the computer, it's going to destroy everything. Well, it didn't. We found a way to balance that. Our design teams draw as much by hand still. Everything starts with a sketch. We got trace paper all over the place. Still hasn't, the drawing hasn't changed. But AutoCAD didn't kill that. The same thing with Revit. So I think that you can't rely on technology for everything. Design still is an iterative process and involves a lot of things. A computer or technology isn't going to design for you. You actually have to put it in there. So having that balance of being able to still be a creative thinker, but use the technology as a tool to help the design process is really important for us. And even when we hire, I mean, when we're hiring, particularly in our design teams, we're looking for a balance of people that can still come in and do a great sketch. And because those are the quick things that could really relay an idea, but we're looking at as a balance on how they can then model it and present their ideas. So I think that the firms that are maybe not as far along the path in technology, it's okay. They'll eventually get there. We all do. I think we were one of the, one of the later firms, I think, probably moving into BIM about a decade ago when other firms were. So I think it's really when the timing is right for everybody. But there's wonderful tools at everybody's disposal. They're not right for everybody, and I think firms should be able to embrace the technologies that are right for them, but also recognize that. Being a good designer doesn't mean you know how to use the technology better than somebody else.
Great advice. I'm sure a lot of people are taking notes right now. Well, Shawn, this has been great. I really, really appreciate you joining us today. I know everyone in the audience is giving a huge round of applause. We just can't hear them right now.